Welcome, everybody. Did you know that there have been countless battles throughout history that never made it into textbooks? Often because they reshaped borders or were too controversial for the victor's narrative. I've been called the Lovecraft of TikTok, which honestly feels more like a curse than a compliment. Anyways, if you like creepypasta stories that exist in the horrifying gaps of our history, then this series is for you. Join me on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Arizona time, and we can explore the dark side of history together. The general doesn't sleep much anymore. Not since the river turned crimson and the cries of men echoed into his dreams. Even in victory, his nights are filled with the desert wind and the ghost of a dying soldier. He is haunted by the memory of his men, the Tang soldiers who marched under the watchful eyes of the dragon banner. He sees them in the flickering candlelight, their armor turned to dust, their faces to bone. Their ghosts surround him in the tent, whispering tales of a fight that history has already forgotten. They speak in tongues of steel and sorrow, and he, Cao Tianzi, the general, understands every word. He remembers the heat of the sun, its relentless glare upon the grasslands stretching endlessly to the horizon. He remembers the clang of steel on steel, the clash of two mighty nations under a sky indifferent to their fates. How did they lose? It wasn't supposed to be a defeat. The Tang army was a well-oiled machine, each soldier a cog in a design meant to conquer. Why then did the gears grind to a halt by the banks of a nameless river? Was it the desert wind that shifted loyalties, or the whispers of promises exchanged in the dead of night? His gaze drifts to a map, not of silk and gold, but of faded memory. His finger traces the path of his doomed campaign. Here is where they marched, here where the enemy awaited. But what drove them to this fateful meeting? Was it power, conquest, the thirst for land that knows no bounds? No, it was something more sinister, more unsettling. Fear, like a specter in the night. Fear had stalked their path, growing with every step, shaping the future with unseen hands. In his waking moments, he questions everything. What if? What could have been? The butterfly's wings in distant lands must have fluttered differently in this timeline. He relives that morning, the sun rising over the plains, painting the sky with hues of false hope. He sees himself leading his men, hears the drums beating their rhythm of war, and in the distance, the faint melody of a foreign tune, the Abbasid Caliphate. They came bearing the crescent moon, their voices as smooth as desert sand, their eyes holding secrets of the endless night. They were led by Ziyad ibn Salim, the man who chose the darkness and won. Why did he fight? For faith, for glory, for a legacy that would echo through the ages. Or was there something more in those dark eyes? Something that whispered of hidden motives, of victories that transcended even the grave. In the depths of the night, the general confronts his past. Faces from that fateful day rise from their graves, accusing him with silent eyes. He hears their whispers on the wind, their pleas echoing in the hollows of his heart. He sees the doubt in their eyes, the accusations unspoken, but clear. Do they blame him for their fate, or do they understand that the fault lies not in one man, but in the very nature of their existence, the burden of being forgotten? They are the nameless dead, casualties of a war that history has swept under the rug, sacrificed at the altar of progress and convenience. Who remembers the soldiers who fell by the banks of the Talas River? Who mourns for them in the stillness of the night? The general does. And in his grief, he finds a terrible solace. He is the last of the living to carry their memories, the final ember in the fading fire of remembrance. For what is a life without memory? A soldier without honor, a battle without a story, an empire without its past. The general is trapped in a prison of his own making, bound by the chains of responsibility. He is the keeper of memories that refuse to rest, the guardian of stories that yearn to be told. Can he bear the weight of their sacrifice? Or will he, too, be consumed by the abyss of oblivion? Only time, that relentless sculptor, can answer this question. Only time can tell if the general will crumble under the weight of his burden or emerge as a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Caught between the living and the dead, he walks a solitary path, seeking answers in the echoes of the past. The general's beard has grown long, streaked with gray, mirroring the march of time. His eyes, once sharp as a hawk's, are now clouded with memories that refuse to fade. In the tapestry of history, his deeds are but a forgotten thread, his name lost to the sands of time. Yet he persists, a lone warrior fighting not for land or gold, but for the right to remember. As the years drift by, he becomes a living monument to a forgotten battle, a testament to the fallen at Talos. He tells their stories to anyone who will listen, his voice hoarse with age and regret. And when no one comes, he speaks to the empty tent, reliving the triumphs and tragedies of a bygone era. His days are spent poring over ancient texts, searching for clues, for any scrap of information that can shed light on the forgotten war. He studies maps, tracing the paths of his ancestors, seeking to understand the forces that shaped their destinies. But knowledge brings no solace, only more questions. Why was this war fought? What were the consequences of that fateful day? And why has history turned its back on these brave souls? The general's quest becomes an obsession, consuming him completely. He loses himself in the labyrinth of the past, emerging only to share his findings with a world that remains indifferent. He becomes a scholar, a historian, forever seeking, forever searching, yet never finding the answers he seeks. He has no one left. The whispers in the night grow louder, more insistent. They call to him, promising peace in the sweet embrace of oblivion. He is weary, oh, so weary. Can he withstand the onslaught of memories, or will he succumb to their relentless tide? As the end approaches, the general finds a strange peace. He has lived a life of duty, honor, and sacrifice. And now, he is ready to join his comrades in the great beyond. He looks up at the stars, their ancient light twinkling above him, and whispers a final prayer. He asks for forgiveness, for understanding, and for remembrance. Then he closes his eyes, surrendering to the inevitable, and drifts away, joining the chorus of whispers in the night. His spirit joins the nameless dead, seeking solace in their shared sacrifice. At last, he is free from the burden of memory, from the pain of a forgotten past. In the grand tapestry of history, some threads are allowed to fray and unravel. The Battle of Talos River becomes a footnote, a whisper in the wind, a scar that time cannot erase. The memory of the soldiers who fell there lingers, a haunting melody that echoes through the corridors of time. They are the forgotten heroes, the nameless dead, their sacrifices acknowledged by none, their stories lost to the sands of time. Yet their spirits remain, forever bound to the banks of the river Tala, waiting for the day when someone will remember. When the sun rises over the plains of Talos, it paints a canvas of gold and crimson, a silent tribute to the bloodshed that stained these lands. The river flows on, carrying with it the secrets of the past. Beneath its tranquil surface, the spirits of the fallen soldiers rest, their presence felt in the rustling reeds and the gentle ripples. The wind whispers through the tall grasses, carrying tales of valor and sacrifice, of a battle that history has swept under the rug. Will anyone listen to the whispers of the wind, or will the stories of Talos forever be lost? Maybe the reason we forget battles like Talos isn't because they weren't important or significant. Maybe it's because the victors don't want us to remember the cost of their triumph. Maybe they fear the reflection of their own brutality in the eyes of the dead. Maybe they prefer to celebrate their victories without acknowledging the sacrifices made to achieve them. Maybe it's easier to claim a glorious victory than to confront the haunting reality of war. Maybe the real tragedy of battles like Talos isn't just the loss of life, but the loss of memory, the deliberate erasure of stories that don't fit the narrative of those in power. Maybe it's a way to control history, to shape the perception of the past, and ensure that certain events are buried in the sands of time. Maybe we forget Talos because they want us to forget, because they want to win without consequence, without remorse. Maybe it's time we started remembering. You know, this is the moment in time when we have lost more people to war than any other single cause. And somehow, it's rarely taught in our history classes or mentioned in our daily lives. So what happens when an entire nation forgets who they are and where they came from? Welcome back. I'm your host, And today, we're going to talk about the Battle of Talos, where the West met the East. If you don't know me, I am your host. I make videos here about history's most epic stories. We've done over 425 episodes together, and I can't wait to see where we go next. Thanks to my amazing patrons for making it possible. You guys rock. Now let's get started. There are battles you cannot find in books. Not because they weren't important, but because someone decided they weren't useful. History, for all its grandeur, is still written by trembling hands. And trembling hands do not always tell the truth. Talos faded from the scrolls, not because it was small but because it was inconvenient. The Temps, ashamed of defeat. The Abbasids, too uncertain of the tale to mythologize it, and so the battlefield was left to rot. The bones of horses turned to chalk. The shields sank into the riverbed like forgotten prayers. The silence was not accidental. It was curated. But there was one man who remembered. He was not a scholar. He was not a prince. His name has long since slipped into dust, but the soldiers knew him as Kazanfar Tilmi, a scout, a wanderer, a man whose home was nowhere and everywhere. He had watched the battle from the shadow of a dune, his horse too tired to join the slaughter, his sword still sheathed. And in that quiet perch above Talos, he saw what history would not, the end of an age and the beginning of another. For weeks afterward, Kazanfar wandered the periphery of the battlefield, not to loot, not to bury, simply to remember. He whispered the names of the fallen aloud, as if afraid the earth would forget them too quickly. One Temps archer, his eyes open and unblinking toward the horizon. One Abbasid lancer, his hands still gripping the standard he would never raise again. The faces were young, the wounds were deep, no glory remained. Sometimes, he would find paper fragments, half-burned documents, ruined dispatches, lines of classical Chinese poetry scrawled by bored soldiers on the back of ration orders. He kept them, not because he could read them, but because they had been touched by someone who no longer breathed. Years later, when Kazanfar reached old age, he would tell stories in caravanserai's half-dream, half-memory. Most laughed him off. A battle no one remembered. A papermaker, changing the world. It sounded like something conjured in a fever. But one child listened, always sitting closest to the fire. She asked him one night, if it mattered so much, why did everyone forget? And Goswan, his voice hoarse with dust, simply said, because it wasn't useful to remember. There are many truths in that answer. History has a sharp edge, but it also has a soft underbelly one that fears contradiction, that avoids shame. The Tang chroniclers painted their empire in gold and jade. There was no space in their portraits for a loss by a distant river. The Abbasid scribes, busy constructing theology and law, saw little need to dwell on the blood price of progress. And so Talos faded. But memory is not always kept in ink. Sometimes, it hides in the earth. Centuries later, a group of nomads camped near the river during a brutal winter. The land was still cruel, the wind still bitter. As they dug for firewood, they uncovered bones, wrapped in ancient, Rustifan armor, still bearing marks of Temps' design. One child, no older than 10, found a medallion pressed into the ribcage of a corpse. It bore no name, only the image of a tiger, mid-pounce, and behind it, the faded outline of a scroll. The elders said it was cursed. The child said it was beautiful. She kept it some nights. She would hold it to her ear and claim she could hear voices so tired, whispering in a language no one spoke anymore. Perhaps it was only the wind. Or perhaps some truths refused to vanish, even when buried beneath 1,000 years. The tragedy of Talos is not just that it was forgotten. It's that it chose silence. That it looked into the eyes of empires and realized some stories are too fragile for fame. And so, like a ghost, it wandered from the lips of Gizwan to the fingers of a child, from the blood-soaked sands to the quiet press of Samarkand's first paper mill, a chain of memory, thin as breath, but unbroken. In the end, maybe it is not the historians who keep history alive. Maybe it is the ones who listen when the wind has nothing left to say. So, I've got to be honest here. This episode was born out of frustration. I've always felt like history leaves out a lot of the nuance, context, and human element of the stories it tells. For example, do you know how many wars the US is currently fighting? If you guessed one or two, you'd be wrong. The official number is 13. They range from Afghanistan to Syria to Somalia and everywhere in between. But despite the fact that these conflicts have dragged on for decades, resulting in thousands of civilian casualties, few Americans could identify them in a map, let alone tell you anything about their origins or consequences. Our perspective on foreign conflicts feels limited to media narratives that sensationalize violence while ignoring the root causes of instability and resentment. And without understanding those things, we can't really expect lasting peace. Learning about obscure historical events like Talos isn't just trivia. It helps us understand the world we live in today, and it gives us perspective on similar situations happening right now. It allows us to learn from past mistakes, appreciate the complexity of global politics, and recognize the humanity of people caught in the crossfire. But most importantly, it reminds us that our opinions are shaped by the stories we're told. History isn't just a set of facts, it sets a conversation across time, and understanding its silences can teach us just as much as its loudest moments. I think that's why I connect with Wondrium so much. They have a class called Revolutions that examines historical uprisings and revolutions, their causes and effects, including one of my favorites, the Islamic Revolution. The course looks at everything from the political climate of the time to the role ordinary people played in shaping major events. It was super well done, very thorough, and beautifully produced. I especially appreciated the section on the aftermath of the revolution and the ways in which the Iranian people grappled with its consequences. It made me think of how different perspectives shape our view of history. Wondrium has thousands of non-fiction documentaries and series covering history, science, nature, and more. It's pretty much the perfect way to spend your free time. The platform is super easy to use. It's available on all devices, and it adds new titles each month. Plus, it's literally cheaper than a cup of coffee. If you want to check it out, click the link in the description below. Afterward, for anyone still listening, I wanted to explain my fascination with the Battle of Talos. First of all, I love the Clash of Civilizations trope, and this is one of the purest examples of it that I've come across. We often think of the meeting of East and West as being all about cultural differences, but it was also a clash of military technology and strategy. The armies of Talos were like oil and water, and it's interesting to consider how each side adapted and reacted to the other. Secondly, I'm obsessed with the idea of forgotten histories. Like, imagine if the Iliad or the Odyssey just vanished from the collective memory. What kind of impact would that have on our perception of the ancient world? How much knowledge would be lost forever? And finally, I'm drawn to the personal stories that emerge in the margins of big historical events. Tales like that of the papermaker Ghazwan, who becomes a living archive of a forgotten battle. His story feels like a metaphor for the fragility of memory and the importance of preserving history in all its forms. Whether it's written down, passed down orally, or simply held in the hearts of those who remember. Now, before I let you go, I need to address something. I totally butchered every language in this episode, so I'm sorry about that. It's clear that my skills are rusty, and I should probably practice more. So thanks for indulging me. I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new. And as always, thank you for joining me. Here's a map. Let's take a look at this Battle of Talos. Okay, where the heck is this place? This is about 70 miles east of Samarkand, Uzbekistan. So here we are. This is the border between Greater Tibet and Greater China. Here's India. We go down to Pakistan. Here's Afghanistan, Iran. We head north up to Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Somewhere over here is the Tarim Basin. Yes, it's part of China, I think. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, here we are. Let's talk about the year of 751 CE. Now the 10th dynasty is ruling China right now. They control Korea. They control Mongolia. They control a lot of this region. Their borders extend into Central Asia. However, a new kid on the block, the Abbasid Caliphate, they are encroaching on those borders. Both sides want this region. They fight over it for decades. But in 751, the Abbasids get the upper hand. This is going to be a Muslim victory, but boy, will it be close. The armies meet in a region known as Talas, probably named after this river right here. Today, there's not even a river here. It's a dried up wasteland. But back then, this was a very real body of water. Our sources are a bit hazy. It seems like both sides bring about 20 to 40,000 troops. It's unclear if these numbers include auxiliary forces or just the actual military. Either way, this is a big-ass army. The Abbasids have superior cavalry. The Temps have superior infantry. Both sides are exhausted by the time they meet. In fact, the Temps' army nearly doesn't show up. They get lost in the mountains. They're starving. They're sick. They got the wrong route. So the Tang forces are coming into this battle on the defensive. Yet somehow, they win. This is a battle with no clear victor. So why is this such a big deal? Because this is going to have huge ramifications. This is going to be the last time Muslims conquer north of the Tian Shan Mountains. For the next 2 centuries, they'll be pushed back from this region. Meanwhile, the Tang dynasty is collapsing around them. The Silk Road will become deserted and trade will decline. The Islamic world will miss out on gunpowder technology for the next 2 centuries. All of this can be traced back to this single battle. And yet, almost everything about it is unknown. We don't know how many people die. We don't know the names of generals. We don't even know the leaders of the Tang army. Although we do know the leader of the Abbasids. His name is Khalid ibn Barmak. He's going to be a hero in Muslim tradition, remembered as the conqueror of Talas. But what happens at Talas leads to his downfall. You see, back in Baghdad, there's a power struggle brewing between the Caliph and the Wazir. The Vizier being Caliph's uncle, the actual ruler of the country. Khalif wants to go home after Talas. He wants to retire. But the Vizier says no. You're gonna stay here and put down these rebellions. So, Khalid gets arrested for basically insubordination. His son will later avenge him, but Khalid is executed anyway. As for the Temps, they're just happy to have survived. They're not gonna learn anything from this battle. They're just gonna continue marching into the mountains until they die. So that's the quick version of what happened. But you know, it's kind of hard to find resources on this battle. They call it the Battle of Talas, the Battle of Fergana, the Battle of Kashgar. Now, I want to share this quote from a historian. He says Talas is not merely a historical event which certain facts can elucidate. Talas is a veil. Behind it lies an entire civilization. Well, let's pull back that veil and try to understand what happened at Talas. You see, the biggest problem with studying this battle is that it doesn't exist in historical records. I mean, it does, but there's literally only one source describing it. It's called the Old Book of Thames, a 200-page account of the Thames dynasty, written about 100 years after the battle takes place. It has this one little paragraph describing Talas. If you want to study this battle, this is your main source. It's basically all we have. The rest of our information comes from archaeology. Archaeologists have discovered bits of equipment They've found Chinese coins, Muslim swords, a Chinese flag with a Tang logo on it, weapons with Persian designs. There's even Tang dynasty paper found at the site. So archaeologists are fairly confident that this battle took place somewhere in this area. But the accounts of the battle itself, that's non-existent. We don't even know how the battle started. We don't know who attacked whom. We don't know the sequence of events. What we do know is that both armies claimed victory. This isn't exactly surprising. Every army does that. What is surprising is that neither side disputes the other's claim. For example, the Arab historian Al-Baludhuri, he has this to say. They fought against the king of China. They defeated him and pursued him, killing a great number of his men. It was the most decisive victory that the Muslims won over the Chinese. Now, Tang sources paint the battle in a similar light. The Old Book of Tang is vague about details, but it does say this. Our army defeated them, and so the rebels fled across the river. So both sides agree that they won. Okay, why is this a Muslim victory? Well, the Old Book of Thames agrees that the Muslim general, Khalid ibn Barmak, he is the top dog. He's the leader of the enemy forces. So the fact that he survives the battle means that the Muslims must have won. Now, this is not really true. Khalid does survive, but he isn't the overall commander of the Muslim forces. He's just the commander of one of the corps. The overall commander is a guy named Sultan Salih. We don't know much about this guy, but according to Muslim legend, he wins the day by throwing pebbles at the tents. So the Arabs thought they won. The Chinese agreed that the Arabs won. Who are we to question them? So Muslim historians credit this battle with bringing Islam to Central Asia. But the evidence doesn't really support this idea. You see, Muslims conquered Greater Iran before they ever met the Tims. In fact, by the time Talas rolls around, there are already Muslim cities in Central Asia. The city of Kashgar, for example, becomes Muslim before the Battle of Talas. So the idea that Talas is some sort of bridgehead for Islam in Central Asia, it just doesn't make sense. Now, don't get me wrong, the battle was important. It stopped the Muslim advance into Chinese territory. It allowed Buddhism to survive in Central Asia. But this wasn't a cultural invasion. This was a military campaign. So when did Islam come to Central Asia? Well, this is hard to pinpoint. It's hard because the process was so gradual. When the Arabs entered Iran, they didn't just convert everyone and move on. They ruled over the lands. They governed the people. They lived among them. And over the course of 3 generations, these Muslim rulers and the subject population gradually became one and the same. So when Islam came to Central Asia, it was the same thing. Over the course of 3 generations, the Muslims of Central Asia became indistinguishable from the Muslims of Persia. So was the Battle of Talas important? Oh yes, absolutely. For example, the Battle of Talas led to the creation of paper in the West. Let me explain. After the battle, the Abbasids captured several Chinese prisoners. These prisoners included technicians who knew how to produce paper. They brought that technology back to Baghdad. Within a few years, Abbasid viziers are commissioning libraries made of paper. However, this isn't unique to the Battle of Talas. Papermaking had actually arrived in the Middle East twice before this, once through India and once through Africa. So while Talas helped spread papermaking technology, it wasn't the only factor. The point is, the battle was important, but not for the reasons we think it was important. It wasn't a clash between cultures, a battle of good versus evil. It was a battle with a relatively small force of well-trained soldiers on one side and a large force of disorganized rabble on the other. One side fights for their homeland. The other side fights to complete a pilgrimage to Mecca. Neither side wants to be there. Neither side can properly fight. And that's why almost no one remembers the Battle of Talas. Well, that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want more content, you can like and subscribe. All those things help. Also check out the links in the description. We have a Discord server. We have a podcast. Leave a comment if you'd like to request a topic. I'll see you guys next time. It's hard to be the victim when you're already dead. If you've ever been wrong, and let's be honest, we all have, you know how it feels like the world tilts on its axis. Reality itself seems to warp and distort, and the ground beneath your feet turns to quicksand. This is how it feels to be the victim. You're trapped in a prison of your own making, unable to defend yourself because the very thing that's supposed to protect you is now being used against you. You feel helpless, hopeless, and most of all, unseen. And so you search for a way out, a way to set the record straight, to tell your story, to make yourself heard. But the more you try, the deeper you sink into the mire. The more you try, the more you realize just how little anyone cares about the truth. They say that Talas ended in a single day, but that's not quite true. Some battles never really end. They go on, not in the clash of swords, but in the way the air changes over a field where blood was spilled. In the way mothers dream of sons who never returned. In the way paper carries a language long after the tongue has gone still. The warriors of Talas were not legends. They did not become marble statues or oil portraits in royal halls. Most did not even have names that survived the rot of time. They were young, poor, cold, men with blisters and broken sandals and stomachs that hadn't known fullness in weeks. They marched because they were told to. They fought because they had no other choice. And they died because dying was cheaper than remembering them. But history, though cruel, is not without irony. For while kings are forgotten with centuries, the work of hands, quiet hands, endures. Somewhere in the brittle deserts beyond the Sea of Daria, there is a shrine. No one tends to it. No one prays there. It is made of 3 stones, stacked without art, without inscription. Local herders call it the place where wind sleeps. They say animals avoid it. That strange dreams come to those who spend the night nearby. Dreams of soldiers walking in silence, of banners torn but still held high, of voices speaking in languages no longer spoken. One traveler, a scholar fleeing persecution in Baghdad centuries after the battle, claimed to have seen these warriors. In a fevered dream, he stood on a barren plain under a sky without stars. All around him were figures in armor, not made of steel, but of light and smoke. They carried weapons that dripped ink, not blood. And they wept, but made no sound. He woke trembling, and wrote only one line in his journal. The forgotten are not gone. They are simply waiting to be read. We want our history to be loud, to be bold, to be drenched in certainty. But the truth is, history lives in doubt, in the shadows, in the gaps between what was written and what was lived. It lives in the eyes of Ghazwan, the wanderer who buried memories with his breath, in the fingers of the Tang artisan pressing pulp with hands still raw from shackles, in the child who found the medallion and heard voices where others heard only wind. And it lives in us. Every time we write a word, every time we turn a page, every time we forget and then remember. The soldiers of Talos were not heroes, but they were human, and in their humanity, unadorned, unnoticed, they stitched together a moment in time that would unravel slowly, quietly, across millennia. Paper became our mirror, our wound, our redemption. It carried scripture, heresy, love letters, and declarations of war. And it all began, not with fire, but with forgetting. There is a final cruelty in that, but also a kind of grace. Because even if the world did not sing for them, the paper did, and still does. So as you fall into sleep tonight, remember this. Not all ghosts wear chains. Some carry scrolls. Some ride the wind. Some simply wait, in the folds of an old book, in the edge of a torn letter, in the empty space at the end of a sentence. Listen closely enough, and you may hear them. They are not gone. They are simply waiting. When I arrived in Samarkand, everyone warned me about it. Scholars, fellow travelers, even fortune tellers along the Silk Road. They all spoke of a curse, a haunting, a specter that lingered in the bazaars and the mosques, a ghost that whispered through the crumbling walls of Registan Square. At first I thought it was just legend, a way to draw tourists into hushed, darkened corners where rugs were sold and pomegranates forgotten. But as the sun set and the eternal blue of Uzbekistan faded into night, I felt it, a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain winds. A presence that seemed to watch from the tops of minarets. A silence that was deeper than the call to prayer. It clung to me until I reached the crossroads. And there, illuminated by a single oil lamp, sat an old man. His name was Ghazwan. He wore simple robes, dusty slippers, and a skull cap pulled low over his face. When I asked about the ghost, he gestured with a gnarled finger toward the Kalian minaret, its shadow stretching long and thin across the square. There, he croaked, his voice like sand slipping through an hourglass. That's where the heart of memory sleeps. I hesitated, wanting to ask more, but he was gone, vanished into the maze of alleys that riddle Samarkand's old city. With dawn, my guide, a young man named Hassan, scoffed at my tale. A ghost, that's a new one. Come, I'll show you the real wonders here. He led me to Timur's mausoleum, Bibi Khanem Mosque, the Shassinda necropolis. Hassan was right. These monuments were marvels of turquoise, tile, calligraphy, and intricate carvings that seemed to dance in the sunlight. Yet, as I marveled, I couldn't shake the feeling that something important was missing. Where were the whispers of the marketplace? The shadows in the afternoon sun? The stories etched on ancient bricks? As we walked, I remembered Gosvin and the beating heart of memory at the crossroads. Days passed. Hassan showed me the bustling bazaars filled with spices and silks, We haggled over carpets, sipped green tea with Plov, and watched whirling dervishes dance in the square. But always, there was a nagging echo. Then one evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of apricot and pomegranate, I returned to the crossroads. It was deserted, silent, and choked with weeds. But something drew me to the spot where Ghazwan had sat. I knelt, brushed away the dirt, and uncovered a small piece of paper, brittle and brown like fallen leaves. Unfurling it carefully, I saw words written in fading ink. They were a poem, words of longing and loss, lamenting a vanished culture. On the back, a date, 1219, the year Genghis Khan's armies took Samarkand. Suddenly, I understood. The ghost wasn't a haunting, it was a heartbeat of a people whose stories were buried, whose voices silenced, but whose memory refused to die. In the great library of Tashkent, I found fragments of their story. The Khwarezmians were a people who thrived in Central Asia. They traded along the Silk Road, built magnificent cities, and fostered scholarship and art. But their world shattered with the Mongol invasions. Their towns were leveled, their books burned, and their traditions scattered like autumn leaves in the wind. Yet their legacy lived on in whispers, in folk tales, in the haunting melodies of an ancient lute called the Deep. I learned their language, studied their customs, and pieced together their history from shards of pottery, faded manuscripts, and the very bricks that once adorned their mosques. The Khwarezmians may be gone, but their spirit lingers in this land like the scent of cardamom and cumin in a winter wind. They live on in the resilience of their descendants, the syncretism of their faiths, and the poetry etched into the fabric of the mountains and deserts. Their story isn't over. It's waiting to be read between the lines, in the spaces left in between. It's a reminder that history is a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, triumph and tragedy, inclusion and erasure. But as long as there are those who seek the truth, the forgotten can find their voice again. Now, what is history if not memory given structure? And what is memory if not grief made permanent? We have wandered far, from the windswept bones of Talas, to the paper mills of Samarkand, to the nameless warriors whose breath still lingers in the cracks between forgotten pages. But here, at the end of the tale, we must ask something far older than war, older than ink, older even than silence itself. Why do we remember? Not all battles are meant to be sung. Some, most, are meant to be born, carried, etched, not in marble, but in muscle, lived quietly, like a weight beneath the ribs. The kind of memory that shapes how you walk, how you speak, without ever showing its face. The battle at Talas was one such wound, a scar across the skin of the world, barely visible now, but still tender to the touch. In the centuries that followed, empires rose and fell, dynasties turned to dust, libraries burned, and kings turned to myth. But the paper remained, folded into scrolls, bound into books, scattered into hands that would never know the names of the men who bled to give them the right to write. A simple victory in a forgotten tongue, spoken around campfires, before the drums were rolled away, before the banners were furled, before the heroes had names, faces, fathers, or kin. Here, at the end of the world's long journey, the answer hangs unspoken between us. We remember because it is the only way to keep from being forgotten ourselves. In the years since Talas, so many things have been lost. We have watched civilizations burn. We have seen too much change. We have stared into the heart of an empire and said nothing. But we have brought you news from the furthest reaches of the earth, carried tales from coast to coast, and now we come to you, humbled and breathless, bearing witness to the very stuff of which memory is made. The finest silk cannot match the strength of a well-worn page. The mightiest blade pales next to the stories held within these covers. Let us show you what it means to remember. In the year 751, a battle was joined along the banks of the Talas River. Few know its name now, fewer still its course. It flows through lands so wild, so far from prying eyes, that even the desert winds keep their distance. But there on the plain of Talas history unfurled, the first tendrils of change reaching out from the east, tangling in the threads of a world grown soft and sure of itself. It was here that two armies met, Tangat and Abbasid, names long faded from living memory, though echoes linger in cathedrals and crumbling archways. Here, men fought and died for faiths and flags that meant more to them than life itself, for kingdoms that would vanish like smoke on the breeze, leaving only a whisper of where the true fire lay. From the pages of legend, we bring you news of their deeds, of Muslim warriors thundering towards China, seeking riches and glory in equal measure, their numbers vast, their fury matched only by the dryness of the land they called home. And opposite them, a people born of the steppes, fierce and free, their horses swift, their bows keen, their loyalty bought not with gold, but with trust. When the fighting ended, the ground drank deep of blood. The air grew thick with grief. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of sorrow. Neither side could claim a clean victory, nor the solace of knowing they were the stronger. Both had bled too dearly for that, and in the days that followed, both remembered their dead in different tongues and under different gods. The enemy they had faced became brother in arms, comrade, companion, fallen just as surely as any of their own. We bring you word of men from distant shores who fought as one, shoulder to shield, steel singing against steel, until the river ran dark with the colors of courage. And when the last notes of the battle faded into the sighing of the plains, there were few to sing the tale, fewer still to hear it. For what is a story if there is no one left to tell it? This is why we came. We scoured the earth, scaled mountains, crossed deserts, braved storms and shadows, sought out every echo, every fragment of remembrance, until we could piece together the tapestry of their sacrifice, stitch by stitch, memory by memory. From the battle-scarred walls of Kashgar, where whispers of old wars linger like ghosts, to the moonlit sands of Turfan, where forgotten tombs hold secrets in their silent embrace. We have walked in the footsteps of those who lived, loved, and lost. We have read the scriptures and studied the stars to understand the world in which they fought, the beliefs that guided their hands as they gripped their weapons tight. We have delved into ancient texts, deciphered cryptic verses, unearthed artifacts that silently screamed of battles past. Every sword, every arrowhead, every inscription on a weathered stone monolith speaks volumes of a time when hearts were bold and convictions ran deep. Yet, even with all this knowledge, with all the stories we've gathered, there are some things we can never truly know. The look in a warrior's eye as he faced his foe, the prayer a mother whispered as she tucked her child into bed. Unaware it might be the last time, the laughter of children echoing in a courtyard soon to be empty. These moments, these memories, are lost to time, leaving us to marvel at the lives that once pulsed with joy and sorrow in a world that seems almost alien to our own. It is in these gaps, in the silences between the stories, that we find the true essence of the Battle of Talas, a testament to the fragility of human existence. As we stand here today, the remnants of two shattered armies, we find ourselves connected to those long gone. Their hopes, their dreams, their fears, and their deaths weave a tapestry that envelops us, reminding us that beneath the grand narratives of history, there are countless individual stories, each as unique and precious as the heartbeat that once animated the men and women who walked this earth. And yet, despite this haunting realization, we are left with a profound sense of gratitude. For in remembering the Battle of Talas, in acknowledging the sacrifices made by those who fought and died here, we honor the very essence of what it means to be human. We celebrate the indomitable spirit of those who dared to dream of a better world, who fought for their beliefs, and who in their struggles paved the way for generations to come. So here, on the banks of the River Talas, where history unfolded in all its grandeur and tragedy, let us commit to keeping their memory alive. Let us ensure that their stories continue to resonate through the ages, inspiring us to be better, braver, and more compassionate in our own endeavors. As we depart this hallowed ground, let us carry with us the lessons of Talas, the bravery, the resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of a better tomorrow. Let their sacrifice be the North Star that guides us, the melody that inspires us, and the flame that kindles our spirits to create a world worthy of their ultimate sacrifice. So now the story fades. Not with a bang, not with the final clang of sword against shield, but with quiet. The kind of quiet that comes only after something sacred has passed through. We have walked together through a battlefield erased from textbooks, along a river whose name no longer stirs the tongue. We have watched forgotten warriors fall without eulogy, seen prisoners plant the seeds of revolution with nothing but paper and patience. We have heard the names the world chose not to keep, and we have remembered them, if only for a moment. Perhaps that is all history truly is. Not a record of what happened, but a ritual of what we choose to hold on to and what we dare to let go. So if you take anything with you from this tale, let it be this: that greatness does not always shout, that empires are not only made in gold and fire, but in pulp and ink, that even those who vanish without name may shape everything that comes after. There are still battles being forgotten, still pages waiting to be written, still voices buried beneath centuries of silence. And maybe, just maybe, tonight you heard one. Now, rest. Let the past lie still. Let the wind close the pages we've opened together. And if you dream, may you walk among those quiet soldiers and prisoners, not as a stranger, but as one who listened. Good night, and remember, they were never truly gone, only waiting. They say that a good story can change your life. I'm living proof of that. And now I want to hear from you. What stories have changed you? What tales have echoed in your heart long after the final page was turned? What myths or memories stir your soul when you think of them now? Share your story with us in the comments below. Now, I know you're probably thinking, this isn't me. I don't do this sort of thing. Well, let me tell you a secret. Everyone has a story. It might feel like yours isn't important, but trust me, every life is a universe unto itself. Your experiences, your joys and sorrows, they've shaped you into the amazing person you are today. And who knows, maybe one day someone will stumble upon your comment and find solace or strength in your words. You have the power to touch someone's life without even knowing it. Here's another thought. When was the last time you revisited a favorite book or movie? How did it make you feel? Nostalgic? Maybe. Our past experiences hold so much power over us. A song can transport us back to a first love. A scent can awaken childhood memories. And a story can reawaken dreams we thought we'd long forgotten. Stories have the incredible ability to evoke emotions and memories that lay dormant within us. Just thinking about sharing my story has brought back a flood of emotions and memories. Some painful, some exhilarating, but all so important to who I am. Think back to a moment when a story touched you deeply. It could be a book, a film, even a simple folktale. What was it about that narrative that resonated with you? Did it offer comfort in times of trouble? Did it inspire you to be a better person? Or did it simply provide an escape from the everyday? Remember that feeling. Hold on to it, because that's the magic of storytelling. And here's the beautiful part. We don't need fancy degrees or titles to share our stories. All we need is a willingness to open our hearts and minds. Storytelling isn't just for storytellers. It's for everyone. It's a way for us to connect, to heal, to grow, and to inspire others. And who knows, maybe your story has the power to change someone's life in ways you've never imagined. Sharing stories also helps us process our emotions and experiences. It's as a way for us to make sense of the world around us and our place within it. By reflecting on the stories that have touched us, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the people around us. We can learn about different perspectives, cultures, and ways of life. And we can discover the strength and resilience of the human spirit. For example, there's this incredible story that I once read about a young girl who faced a life-threatening illness. In the face of such adversity, she turned to stories for comfort and inspiration. As she read about the bravery of fictional characters, she found the strength to fight for her own life. And when she shared her story with others, she became a beacon of hope for many. Her story touched the hearts of people around the world and inspired them to see the power of storytelling. Stories have the power to unite us. They can bring people together from all walks of life and create a sense of community. When we share stories, we open up our hearts and minds to the experiences of others. We can learn about different perspectives, cultures, and ways of life. And we can discover the common threads that connect us all. Think back to a time when you shared a story with someone else. How did it make you feel? Connected, maybe closer to the other person. Sharing stories creates a sense of intimacy and trust. It's a way for us to bond with others and create lasting connections. When we listen to someone else's story, we show them that we care. We give them the space to share their thoughts and feelings, and we validate their experiences. I want to share one more story with you. This time from my own life. There was a time when I was going through a difficult period, and I found solace in writing down my thoughts and experiences. I didn't know what I was doing, but as I wrote, I felt a sense of relief and empowerment. After a while, I decided to share my story with a few friends. I was nervous, but their support and encouragement gave me the strength to keep going. Soon, I was sharing my story with a wider audience, and the response was overwhelming. People from all over the world reached out to me and shared their own stories. It was a humbling experience, and I realized the power of storytelling to heal and connect us. If you're hesitant to share your story, I understand. It can be scary to open up, but the rewards are immeasurable. You never know who you might touch with your words. If you're ready to take the first step, leave a comment below with a brief summary of your journey. You can talk about what you went through, how it affected you, and how you coped. Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. And who knows, maybe one day your story will inspire someone else to do the same. And if you're not ready to share your full story, that's okay too. You can start by sharing a memorable experience or a life lesson you've learned. Even a small step like that can lead to greater things. I know you've got this. Take that first step and let your story do the rest. Lastly, if you found value in the content, please hit the like button. It genuinely means a lot. And if you'd like to continue exploring more stories, consider checking out our other content. You'll find a range of topics and perspectives that are sure to captivate you. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. Together, let's keep the stories alive and embrace the transformative power of storytelling. Until next time, happy storytelling.